Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A Father's Love Healing Through Heartache. My name is Chris Leparty. I'm here with my good friend Dan Cortine, and we're going to continue with part two of our episode about the first week after we lost our sons, Mason and Jameson. Today, we're going to talk about getting the depth a little bit more about the funeral service, the preparation for the funeral, and how we dealt with that, and also the actual service itself and what we did to get through those difficult moments. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and let him tell his story. How you doing, Dan?
Doing okay. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for everybody that's tuning in to listen. I know last week we talked a little bit, Chris and my decision of what do you do with our sons, and not our decision, but our family with Erica and Amanda. Obviously, were involved. Our family, we battled with cremation or burial. As I said last week, we talked to some of our trusted friends within the church, and every one of them said there was nothing that was not biblical about cremation, and they highlighted the verse ashes to ashes and will return to dust. And so that made us at least comfortable that cremation was biblical. But then, as I said last week, I decided right away that I wanted to cremate Jameson. I can't even begin to picture Jameson laying in the ground decaying. That just rips my heart out and makes me sick to my stomach. So I knew right away I wanted cremation. Erica struggled a lot with it. And we just kept talking through the week, and she eventually decided that cremation was the way that she wanted to go as well. So we made that decision, and we went to the funeral home and began planning the service. And in our funeral home, it's a small town. It's just a tiny little room that they try to make it as homey as possible, but there's no way you can decorate that room in a way that's any way comfortable. And they have sitting on the wall all the shelves of their urns. And we were paying very close attention to those, obviously, because we had decided on cremation. And we're just looking at each of those urns, and they're all so ugly and formal and cold and impersonal that we really struggled with, oh my God, which one of those are we going to pick for our son? I mean, this is his final home, and none of them felt right. And that's, I guess I can hit right off the bat with another thing that people can do. Erica's dad came in, sat with us through the whole thing, and when we were telling him our thoughts about how we didn't really connect with any of the urns, he told us one of his best buddies had gone into woodworking and had a lathe, and he had offered to make us an urn. And that immediately, that there was no doubt about it, that was the right choice, because it would be something so much prettier and so much more personal and meaningful and honorable. And so again, I just want to stress to people right off the bat, we all have a time, we all have talents, we all have, maybe we don't all have money, but some of us have money, but we all have something that you can do. Think creatively about ways that you can help your grieving friends, because there is something that you can do, and there's probably something that only you can do. And it's not necessarily an easy thing to identify, but it's there. So we were really touched by this offer for the urn, and we took him up on it. And then the funeral home director came in, and he started going through all the legal contractual stuff. And obviously there's no easy way through that. There's nothing fun about it. We were planning the service, we were planning the week ahead, just everything. And when we told him cremation, he had to pull out 2 separate pages. And this man was wonderful. He was so kind and so gentle for us, and I'll share a lot more about him later today or another time, but just a wonderful, wonderful man that was amazing at his job. But we could tell when he pulled out these 2 papers that it was going to be something even worse than just planning a funeral for your son. and it was the lawyer pages about cremation. And he just got this look on his face and the tone in his voice, and you could tell just through the whole meeting that this was eating him up, because he was really touched by the fact that a kid had passed, and he was doing all this planning for a kid, and he was emotional, and we appreciated that. Obviously, it made us feel comfortable. But these 2 pages, you could tell it was ripping him apart as well, and it was another thing, like I explained last time about the autopsy and the legal need for that. In today's world, funeral homes need to have disclaimers about cremation, and he read it to us, and as we're reading along through it, it is the most horrific things you can probably ever read in your life, as they describe in detail the process of cremation and the temperatures that they have to use and what happened, how the body breaks down and all that stuff. And again, he was wonderful as he read it, but he kept saying, it's like, I'm sorry, I have to read this. And we understand it, because in a lawsuit happy world, somebody can easily come back on them and say, I didn't know it was going to be that awful. And so it was just the most horrific reading I've ever had in my life about what was going to happen to our son. And Erica and I, before we signed it, we looked at each other again in fear. It's like, God, do we really want to put our son through that? Even though he's dead, do we really want to put his body and his soul through that? Maybe it is better just to bury him. And we took a few breaths, and a few seconds later it was like, no, this is horrific, but it's what we need to do. I think ultimately what we kept our focus on was the fact that if we cremate Jameson, we can have him in the house with us forever, and we can still feel like he's a part of us, or a part of our family, and we could still visit him easily. And we talked too about where would we bury him, and there was no place that jumped out. All our family is way too far away, and we didn't have any real connection. Jameson didn't have connections there. Raleigh would have been great, but there was no family there. So it's like, I mean, it's got to be here, even though we had just moved there, what was it, 7-8 months earlier than that. We've got to have him here, and if we cremate him, at least we can have him close by. So that's ultimately what we went with, was the cremation. And almost every time I walk by his urn in my house, I think about Chris, and I think about Amanda, and I think again about, as awful as I think Erica and I had it, I can't even begin to try to put myself in their shoes, with, again, being across the country and trying to decide where is best to have Mason rest. So Chris, I've told you privately, but I want to tell everybody, I admire Chris and Amanda's strength and courage so much, because that decision is just incomprehensible.
Yeah, and that I don't know why. For us, cremation never jumped out in our mind. I don't know why, to be honest with you. Would it maybe have been better for us to have Mason with us because we moved so much? I don't know. Those are things I struggle with now, but in the fog of the first days, it didn't really click in our mind, to be honest with you, and I don't know why. Um, as I hear your story, and I know that Jameson is with you guys every day now, sometimes I question, did I make the right decision? But, I have to trust what I felt was right at that moment. I don't regret it one bit. I've said before that Mason is buried next to his aunt, Amanda's sister, and I have comfort in knowing that he's really not alone. His aunt is right next to him, and thanks to Amanda's mom for giving up her plot for Mason. She gave that right to us right away, and it is a difficult choice. You're right. I mean, not to get gruesome, but like you said, cremation is a very difficult process. It's so much so they have to read off the legal stuff to make sure you understand the whole process. Burial is difficult as well because, you know, I'll keep saying it. I'll say it again. Your job as a dad is to take care of your family and make sure they're okay. And when they put your son in the ground for burial, not only are you sad because they're alone and you're not with them, you just feel this sense of utter failure. Like, wow, I really. It doesn't matter what anybody says to you. Everyone's told me you've done everything you could. Everyone did. I don't care what they say. It's always going to feel like I messed something up somewhere along the line.
Yep.
And if I would have just done this one thing different, maybe my life wouldn't be in this misery right now. So the funeral director for us, I had 2 funeral directors, one in Idaho that arranged the transport and Mason's body. He was all dressed and ready to go when he left Idaho. We got everything for him in Idaho that we wanted him to be buried in. I said before, Mason was not into being dressed up like any other 7-year-old. He hated it, and we weren't going to have him go out that way either. So we got an awesome soccer shirt, shorts, high socks, new shoes, put a brand new hoodie in the casket with him. We wanted to make sure he was comfortable, and that might sound ridiculous to some people, like, your son is no longer here, but it's important. It was important to us that we felt like he was comfortable. So I'm happy. It's one of these things to talk about, right? These random thoughts that pop in your head. In Idaho, where we live, we had a Walmart. That was pretty much it. Okay, we were an hour from Boise in Mountain Home, Idaho, small town. And we went to the Walmart to pick out what Mason was going to wear. And because really we knew clothes that were there is what he would have been most comfortable in. And you never would have thought it when it happened, but now walking through the boys section, buying clothes for, let's say, Carson, our 4th son, he's getting into those sizes now that Mason was. And, the difficulty of just walking through that section in the store, thinking about what if, thinking about, man, Mason would have loved this outfit. Those are more difficulties that people just do not understand. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad they don't, to be honest, because I don't want them to go through this pain. But wow, going to Walmart, walking through the kids section to buy clothes for your other children, and thinking about the what ifs at Walmart.
Yeah.
I can't, like we've talked about, it's hard to explain those types of emotions, but it's something that I want to bring up so people understand that, hey, when you're going through this grief, it's not like we can turn it on, we can turn it off. It is 24/7 on your mind, all the time. And that's just another example of, hey, when Mason first passed away, if I went to the grocery store probably a month or 2 later, I walked past popsicles. I burst out crying. Mason loved popsicles. He ate them every single day. He fed the whole neighborhood with popsicles. He took a whole box out, handed them out to everyone. The difficulty of just looking at a popsicle box put me to tears, and those are the types of things that we're dealing with on a constant basis, for sure.
As you're talking, I'm going through my list, and ice cream was one of them. And yeah, Chris and I, we're so thankful that most of you listening don't have to think about this and worry about this. That's true. But again, just the understanding that, this is our life now and forever, that we have the same thing, that walking by the ice cream shop, every time I pour a glass of root beer or cream soda, I have those thoughts, because Jameson would be right there with that little smirk on his face, just hopping up and down like kids do until I poured him a cup. And every time I watch a sporting event, it's hard because Reese is not my athlete. He is not my sports buddy. Jameson was. And it's just everything everywhere that we have to, there's a piece missing. And Reese enjoys shooting basketball in the driveway still sometimes. And he asked me to go out play, and I'm like, that's so hard because Jameson was there every day. And again, that's what he and Reese did for 2 hours, perfectly healthy, the night he died. And it's so just everything, everywhere.
Yep, literally every task. because everything is so tied, because you're a family and you're so used to doing everything together, the thought of doing something without that person is so difficult and so. Well, but the hard part for us, I think, Dan, for myself and for you as a dad, is you still want to be there for your other child.
Mm-hmm.
You still want to participate and make sure that they realize that you love them and you want them to know that they can still come to you for anything.
Yeah.
So there's another mental health aspect we could throw in the mix. You still have to do these things with your other kids because they need you. They need you to do it. But you literally have zero desire to do it, or at least I know I did. I had zero desire to play catch with my son. I just didn't. It was not in my mind that I wanted to. Not that I didn't want to spend time with my other son. I'm just so sad about losing Mason. It's hard to want to do that stuff.
Yeah.
But you muscle through it anyways, because that's what, that's what I think, at least how you feel, Dan, and the same as me. Like, you still want to be a good dad and you want to take care of him, so you do everything you can.
Yeah, and that you're hitting me really hard, because absolutely you're totally right. But yeah, the desire and the energy is just not there. And for me, that's hard because Jameson's Joy, our main mission is to help connect dads with their kids. That's been something I've been passionate about for the last 12 to 13 years of my teaching career. And here I am trying to encourage other dads to be involved, and I am just failing at it so miserably so often because I'm still grieving Jameson.
I think that's a good point. Like, you really start to feel like you're letting your other kids down because of your sadness, and you're doing everything you can, but is it enough? I guess that's a question that I play in my mind. Like, am I doing enough? Like, I'm trying my best, but how is this affecting my other kids now? They're dealing with grief too, but they need their dad. They need their mom. But dad and mom are not the same dad and mom they knew before.
Right.
They're different people now. And, I think my therapist told me, you're really a new family now, whether you want to think it or not. You have a new life now. Yeah. And you have to learn how to live that new life now. And that's the most difficult part.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Dan, we talked a lot about, the funeral. How about the service? How did the service go for Jameson?
Well, I have quite a bit of lead up, and the tone of this is thankfully going to be a lot more positive. This, for my story at least, is getting into, again, things that people did that were really helpful and super special. And Jameson passed on a Wednesday, and we set his service for the following Friday. So we had about a week and a half. And I think it was that Sunday or the Monday, we had all the funeral preparations done. Our church family was wonderful, setting everything up on their end. The funeral home director was wonderful. People were wonderful because they had the funeral costs, like Chris talked about last week, I think it was, of just the service was paid off quickly by friends and the community members. So after that initial, all that planning stuff, and we had the time to just try to deal with things, that's where, again, another round of people stepping up really happened. And this is one of the times I'm really thankful to be in the small town, because if we still lived in the Raleigh area, there's not a chance that this would have happened. And I'm sorry, there's just so many things. This might take a while. Chris, jump in at any point. If I trigger a memory or a thought, please jump in, because
take your time.
I've got a lot. On that Sunday or the Monday, I received a Facebook message from a mother in the Raleigh area. And it was the mother of Jameson's best buddy at his school before we moved. And she told me that obviously Jameson's death had impacted her son tremendously. And in honor of his buddy, he decided, this is a 10-year-old kid, he decided in honor of his buddy that Wednesday at school he was going to make it a random act of kindness day. And he was going to spend the entire day going out of his way to do kind acts for other people and tell everybody about his buddy Jameson. And you guys, I mean, it goes without saying how incredibly special that was. And that triggered an idea for me. So I talked to my boss at school. I shared it with her, and she's like, "We're in." So my boss at Brevard Elementary School got together with a couple the counselors and another teacher who was known to be heavily involved in great things like this. And they organized for that Friday, the day of Jameson's service, was going to be a random acts of kindness day at Brevard Elementary School. And they made a video and started pushing it out in all the school communication things. That Friday was a random act of kindness day. It was also a Wear Blue Day because we're Duke Blue Devil fans. And our boss at the time was a Carolina Tar Heel fan, so even she wore Duke Blue the day of Jameson's service in honor of him. And just things like that. They bought some ribbons and decorated the sign at the road and the front door with blue ribbons, all in honor of Jameson. And that was amazing. And it just grew so quickly that we decided to make it a random act of kindness day in the town. And it just took off. Everybody we knew started publishing it everywhere. And I'll jump ahead to the day of the service. We weren't even out of bed. We woke up and my phone was buzzing with Facebook alerts and text messages, people sending in pictures of the pay it forwards at restaurants, and somebody had bought a ton of flowers and just walked around the grocery store parking lot putting flowers on people's door handles. And I was sent pictures of Jameson's buddy at school. His best buds at his new school were holding the doors open at the entryway for kids to come into the building. And I mean, it was just amazing. And then I was sent a picture of some guy, I have no idea who it was. Some guy at a restaurant had his meal paid for and heard the story, what was going on, and he asked the employees at the store if they had an envelope that they could put on the counter and just collect money all day. And so I had a picture of a white business envelope with hashtag Jameson's Joy. And we had some money collected there. And that envelope is what started Jameson's Joy officially, when they created the hashtag. And it makes me proud and happier that Jameson's Joy was not created by me. It was not created by Erica. It was truly created by this young man. And I don't like naming names. I don't like putting names out there because I know people don't like the praise a lot of times. And I hate the feeling that I might leave somebody out that did something amazing. But I'm going to say it. Caden Gregory in Fuquay, North Carolina. He's that little 10-year-old boy. And he started Jameson's Joy. A little 10-year-old boy found a way that he could do something to help a grieving family. And if a little 10-year-old boy can do it, goodness, can't we all find a way to help people? So we had this envelope with Jameson's Joy, and that started, and it got so big. This wasn't all that Friday, but it got so big that we started tracking the random acts of kindness, and people were doing them literally all over the world. I received notes from people in China who did various acts, Australia, all over Europe. There's some weird little island off the coast of England that I never knew existed, but it's there, and we had something done there. And one of my favorite ones, they're all my favorites, don't get me wrong, but when I say this, one of my favorite ones is that some lady adopted an elephant in Africa. And for the next year, that elephant's medical bills were paid for in the honor of Jameson. It was just amazing how the kindness thing started, and all because of a 10-year-old little boy.
Yeah, wow, that is amazing.
Yeah.
That's an amazing story.
Erica received a note from the mother of one of Jameson's best buddies back in preschool. And she worked for a gentleman he runs a business with horse and buggies. And as soon as she heard and relayed it to her boss, he didn't even hesitate. He's like, I will take my horse and buggy out there if they want me to. And it's a 5 hour drive, 5.5 hour drive with kids from Raleigh to Brevard, where we live now. I don't know how long a drive it is when you're hauling a horse and a buggy behind it, but I imagine it's 6 or 7 hours at least. But obviously, I mean, who's going to say no to that? So we told her, yes, we are certainly interested if we can logistically make it happen in the town. So I emailed the police chief in our town, and within a day I was talking to the assistant chief, and I told him about this offer, and he didn't even hesitate. It's done. You tell me what roads and when, and we'll have them shut down for you. To think that a man is going to give up probably hundreds or couple $1,000 to bring his horse and buggy out to carry my boy through town. And then in today's world where so many people complain about so many things, to have the assistant police chiefs not even hesitate and say, yeah, we'll shut down the whole darn town for your boy. And then this group of people was organizing to have the streets lined with as many people as they could possibly get for Jameson's procession through the town. And the day of the service, it was pouring. And that's a whole nother story of Chris and I have talked. I struggle with signs, and this was certainly a bad sign if you believe in signs. But it was pouring all day long. The forecast was awful. And quick little side note, I think it's a great time to mention that Christian cliches don't help. And when it's pouring, for you to say, don't worry, God's crying over Jameson, not helpful. Not. If God was really crying over Jameson, why did he take him? That's my thought. And we can get into the biblical side of biblical accuracy thing another time, but Christian cliches are not helpful, even for the strongest Christian. But it was pouring, and there were still at least 200 people standing throughout town under umbrellas, getting soaked, just to pay respects to Jameson. And that just meant the world. Another really little thing. When you see a funeral procession, it's something Chris alluded to earlier of so many things you don't think about until you're in this. When you see a funeral procession, pull over. I think in my life I've been pretty good about pulling over and trying to be respectful, but I know I haven't always done it. I hope I've done it a lot more than I'm thinking I had now, but it means the world when we're driving through town to see people pull over, or at least stop, because it may not be safe to pull off the road, but at least stop. And just as a way to pay honor to your family's pain and what they're going through. We had the people that got out of their car. Again, there's just different levels of things that were special. People that actually get out of their car and put their hand on their heart. Every one of those acts, from a stopped car to standing there, hand on your heart, whatever it is, means it helps at that moment. It doesn't make us happy, but it helps take that pain, that sharp pain away, at least partly. And then again, just every single one of our officers, the emergency department, fire departments, everybody who was involved in shutting down the many roads that every one of them just standing with their hands on their heart, and many of them with tears in their eyes. I am super thankful to be in a small town for that, because I there's no way that would have happened in where we moved from. So to everybody listening that's in the Brevard area, um, if you had anything to do with any part of that, it it was huge. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Dan, that's amazing story. It's amazing to hear what an awesome town you live in and how they came to support you, and how people all over the world supported you guys and Jameson and the creation of Jameson's Joy. What an amazing honor and story for such a tragedy. That's, like you said, it doesn't make it any easier, but you can know that those random acts of kindness are happening in your son's honor, and that's a big deal. That's important.
Yep.
So sounds like you live in an awesome town, to be honest with you.
I do. And it is every time. And if you notice, Chris and I are pretty intentional about saying Jameson and Mason's name. It's super important for us to say his name and hear his name. And yeah, every time there's an act of kindness anywhere in the world and we're tagged, it's special.
I can definitely understand that. That makes a lot of sense. I wish I could say Mason's was as grand, because he deserved it too, but we were in the middle of COVID, and we had some major issues with not only the funeral home, but also just even getting people to be allowed to be at the cemetery, to be honest with you. New York State had a lot of rules going on in the height of COVID, and it wasn't a typical funeral. It wasn't a typical ceremony at the cemetery. Part of me is glad it was like that, to be honest with you, because I think the same thing would have happened for Mason if everyone would have been allowed in the funeral home. I have no doubt in my mind. Amanda and I are both from Cheektowaga, West Seneca, New York, right outside suburbs, right outside of Buffalo, and we both know a lot of people. We lived our whole childhood there. I left right at 18. Amanda left at 22. But all our families are still there, and I have no doubt in my mind that we would have had a lot of visitors for sure. But because of COVID, it was really limited to, we only had allowed to have 10 to 15 people in the funeral home at a time, and people kind of had to rotate through. So it was a much more intimate experience in terms of people getting to pay their respect to Mason and to us and talk with us. So part of me is grateful for that, to be honest with you. I think we might have been overwhelmed with the amount of support we would have got at the funeral home and at the cemetery. Mason was shown at the funeral home for 2 days. So when the second day was over and he was buried on the third, I can't even remember, to be honest now. It's all such a fog. But when it was finally time to take him to the cemetery, it was a great day. It was sunny, it was beautiful outside, a little bit warm. I remember the funeral director asking if we wanted to be in the room when they were going to close the casket, and that was, as I think about it now, how difficult that moment was. We didn't want to be in there to see it, to be honest. It was too hard for us to fathom. So we asked if he could leave, and it was just myself, Amanda, and the boys in there. And we said our goodbyes. We gave him a kiss, and we walked out. And so they closed the casket and they loaded him in the vehicle, and then we went to the cemetery. There was no grand procession or anything like that because there wasn't allowed to be one, really, to be honest. At the cemetery, I was upset, of course. They set up everything at the wrong gravesite. There was someone else being buried at that cemetery that day as well, but it was later in the day, so they didn't have anything set up at our site. So I got to give it to the funeral director. I mean, he's in a suit and tie, and he is running, and it is hot, and he is running back and forth, getting everything ready. Obviously not ideal, but people are humans, and these things happen. it is what it is now. Nothing can be taken back in that sense. Um, when it was time to take Mason to be over his grave, um, myself, my dad, Amanda's dad, um, and some other family members helped carry Mason over. And it wasn't like planned; it just sort of naturally occurred like that. And I remember putting my hand on his casket, just thinking, wow, I can't believe this is going to happen right now. And um, we found a priest that was willing to come out to the cemetery and do some blessings for us. So they came out, and we had, I think people just didn't care anymore. A lot of people came out to the cemetery. I'm glad they did. And a lot of family and close friends. And they came out, and we had the service, and, it's over in the blink of an eye, really. For those who don't know some of the rules, which I didn't until Mason passed, is caskets actually go into a vault in the ground. They put a concrete vault in the ground, and the funeral home had set up where a family picture, this giant family picture, was put on the top of Mason's vault. That's extra, but we didn't pay for it. That was, like you said, a random act of kindness that they did for us because they felt so. They felt for us for losing Mason, and they put that on there, and that felt good. Like we were going to be part of with him down there, and but because they, this is just more schematics in terms of things that didn't go great that day that I wish would have went better. They didn't put the vault in the right grave either. They put it in the other grave. So they had to, when the funeral was over, we left. But the funeral director said, I will not leave his side until everything is done. So they had to move Mason over and put his vault into the ground, and then put Mason into the ground, and then, cover him up with dirt and all that. So difficult. I'm trying to just be a positive person, just say, hey, it was a human error. I'm not perfect, and no one's perfect, but just another thing that didn't make the day any better by any means. Amanda was very mad at that moment when we first got there and we saw how everything was set up. But what's said and done is over. It is what it is, and I don't remember those moments, like those bad moments. In fact, I haven't thought about them until we just talked about it right now. So I just think about the service, and when the service was all done, Mason loved blowing bubbles. A lot of people release balloons, stuff like that. We decided to have bubbles for everyone, and we gave bubbles out to everyone, and I thanked everyone for coming and for their support, and how much we really appreciated them and loved them all. And we asked everyone to blow some bubbles in honor of Mason, and everyone did. Now there's always a package of bubbles at Mason's grave, and every time anyone goes, we ask them to blow some bubbles to remember him, and let those bubbles go up to heaven to him. So, and I know people do, and I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. And those days at the funeral home and the service, they were, it's hard to say what's the most difficult part. Was the difficult part the hospital? Was the difficult part the travel, the funeral home, service? They all are so difficult, but they all have such unique emotions. They all are different emotions, but they're all painful at the same time. Going through those moments, they don't haunt me as much as the hospital, but they do haunt me. I guess that's a good way to put it. I don't think about them as often as I do. Now, I will say that I am often haunted by the sight of Mason in the coffin. I think about it, as he laid there. One of the things, this is one of those parts they don't tell you about, like, they put like what is it called? A plastic, it's kind of like a fake chest on top of them. It's plastic. It goes on top of their chest. It's to make sure that their chest still looks raised up a little bit, because they're not breathing anymore. They don't have any of that muscle support anymore. They don't want their chest to look like it's compressed in. That was really hard for me. I don't know why. That's something that really stuck out to me. um, the makeup they put on their body, um, when you touch them, how I think I just rubbed Nathan's head a lot, feeling his hair through my hands. That was something I remember for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So those were all really difficult moments that um, still play in my mind very often. And um, well, I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it, how I feel about it all. It's hard. It's sad. Um, we actually took a couple pictures of Mason in the coffin, and I don't know why. Uh, some people do that. Some people don't. They're on my phone, but they're in a folder that it's not. It doesn't just pop up right in my face. I see it all the time when I open my camera. It actually says Mason's last days. This is his last days in the hospital, and the funeral. So the hard part though is, what do I do with it? Do I delete it? Do I not delete it? I don't know. As I go to my mental health appointments and I talk to them, they tell me I'll know when the right moment is, and not to rush it. So that's kind of how I'm going about it right now. Um, so, well, that's my part, Dan.
Yeah. I have the same photos on my phone. I just it is I just Erica and I struggled the whole week where Jameson was in the funeral home. I wanted to be there every second because I knew in a week I was never going to hold my son's body again and never be able to give him another kiss or anything. So I wanted to be there, and I went there every day, and I read with him, or I just sat there and talked with him, or whatever. Erica went once, and then she's like, that can't be the last image I see of my boy. And they're both right. I mean, Chris and I seem to have a lot of things that we did the same, and there's a lot of things that are different. When you're grieving, there's no right way to do it. You got to do what feels right to you. But I did when we had we had a very small viewing with just our closest of friends, and at the very end, we asked one of our friends to take pictures, and that's again, it's just one of those sick thoughts that we have to deal with for the rest of our life. Of, will you take our picture of me with my dead son? And that it just sounds morbid, but it was so important to have that photo, and I wanted a photo of us kissing him and with my hand on his chest. And so I get it. And then the last thing we did, we asked everybody to clear the room when it was getting close to time. We wanted our last couple minutes to say goodbye, and we read the book Daddy Hug with him one last time, we had done a million times, and we made sure. I guess one more special story I can add with a life lesson is that Jameson had written a letter as a school assignment to the Duke basketball program just a couple months before, and I don't even know what the letter said. I'm a big fan and all the typical little kid stuff. And he waited. He was hoping for a response, and you never know if you're going to get one of those responses or not. And if you do, it's going to be a generic one. And he never got a response. The day after he died, literally, he died on Wednesday the 27th, Thursday the 28th. We got a letter from Duke University, and it was a card thanking him for his letter, and it was a signed team picture. And it was, I mean, anybody with kids knows how much he would have flipped out to get that mail. And he would have carried it around all night long, just beaming from head to toe. And it was 1 day, 2 days late. And I'm just, again, like Chris said, I'm not mad at the people. I mean, how can you be mad at somebody? But, God, I wish they had responded 2 days earlier. I mean, they had that letter for 2 months or whatever it was. golly, if they hadn't put it aside and put off something that they could have done so easily. But we left that in the casket with him, and we read Daddy Hug. We gave him our last kisses and hugs, and we we walked outside and let the funeral home take care of the rest.
Well, Dan, I think both these stories are pretty hard, and I'm sure others that are dealing with grief have very similar stories. And for those that haven't dealt with grief, I hope you can understand what what's going through our mind and how we're trying to get through each day and why it can be so difficult because then these thoughts are constantly flowing through your mind. How difficult it can be to concentrate on things. So, but with that, I don't know. I think that might be a good spot to end the night. What do you think, Dan?
Yeah, I think I've covered everything I had to share about the funeral. So, um,
Definitely. Well, I wanted to say thanks to everyone again for listening and how much Dan and I really appreciate your guys' support and help as we're going through this. And hopefully, we're giving you guys some advice. Again, if you want to email us, Dan will give the email again. If there's something you want to hear or something you want to explain a little different, by all means, shoot us an email, let us know, and we'd be more than glad to talk about that.
absolutely. And yeah, you can email us at info@jamesonsjoy.org, or you can, if you have our personal emails, by all means use those. Use our Facebook messaging, whatever. Doesn't matter the method. Just send us your feedback. Send us your comments. If we're saying anything helpful, it really would help us to hear it from you guys. And send us your questions if you have anything to follow up on. We want to make this as effective and helpful as possible to everybody that chooses to take the time to listen. And thank you all if you're doing that. We appreciate it.
Everybody have a great night. Thank you again.